Session Blood.
Welcome to Session Blood, everyone, and today we've got a gameplay video for you. So it's Blitz, Kano vs Dash, or Wizard vs Mechanologist, whatever you prefer. Now, this is, I'm Kieran, and I'm playing with Carol.
Yeah, so I'm Carol and I'm playing Dash today.
Yeah, so I'm playing Kano today, and this matchup is kind of an interesting one that we wanted to showcase. So the Dash is a Dash control deck, and the Wizard is kind of a standard Wizard deck. We wanted to show a strategy you can actually use on Kano against very slow decks. So it can work in Classic Constructed as well. So what you'll see me do this game, effectively, is all I'm trying to do is set up a one-turn kill combo. So what that involves is me just pitching a number of blues to the bottom of my deck. So I want to have 4 blues on the bottom of my deck. And after that, I want to have a very set series of cards so I can pull off this big combo. So we'll go through it as the game goes on. Do you just want to talk about your deck quickly as well, Carol?
Yeah, so this is a very control type version of the Dash deck. Basically, I'm just trying to get as many of my items, which is the 2 chambers, into play and fatigue my opponent. I run a Nalrune 5 against Wizard, and I also run things like Sigils and Sun Kisses for life gain to stop getting, basically, have as high of a life point and basically just be able to survive the carnage coming from the Kano player.
Yeah, so for my deck, you won't actually see me doing much over the first few turns of the game. So I need to have 4 blues on the bottom, and then I can start to count my pitch order. Once I have those 4 blues on the bottom and 2 energy potions in play, plus Vindale's Tunic, then I know I have access to up to 15, 16, 17 resources. So here I play out a Sonic Boom. I know it's going to get blocked out, but the main thing here was I just wanted to get 2 more blues on the bottom of my deck. So at this point, I know I have 4 blues on the bottom of my deck, so now I'm starting to keep in mind how many cards left in my deck. Once I have the 4 blues, I want to get some combination of 3 cards. I need to get 2 Blazing Aethers, a Stir the Aether Wind, and a Forked Lightning onto the bottom. So I need 3 of those 4, and 1 of them in Arsenal.
Yeah, and I'm basically trying to put as much pressure as I can on Kieran, chip away as much damage as I can, and I feel like cards like Command and Conquer and Light and Strike are quite key to this. Those are the main kind of threats that my deck has that can actually put pressure.
Yeah, because the one downside of playing the strategy that I'm going for here is, particularly in Blitz, if you get forced into blocking with cards you need for the combo, then you can find yourself in trouble. So here we see
And yeah, also I'm trying to pitch away as many cards to prevent the arcane damage, just to keep my life total as high as possible, and in case I'm able to block Kieran's combo.
Yeah, so you'll see there I pitched a Stir the Aether Wind. So now I know on the bottom I've got 4 blue cards and a red Stir the Aether Winds. So I'm getting there. I'm setting up the combo.
Yeah, one thing I want to talk about in terms of the Kano side is, how do you know that you're going to draw the 4 blues, in terms of, do you keep a track of how many hands you've gone through, or...
Yeah, basically, so once I've got, you'll see I won't pitch anything else until I've got those 7 cards set up on the bottom of my deck. And once I do that, you're allowed to count your deck at any time. So, if I have to block with a bunch of cards, once I've got the 7 cards on the bottom, I'll just count my deck face down. And if I've got 30 cards, then I'll just know in my mind I've got 23 cards to go. So I draw that hand of 4 blues. And it's not you do have to pay attention a little bit, but it's not super complicated because you kind of just count it down in your head. So you're like, okay.
Yeah. And I guess something like here, you might as well overblock it because you don't want to be left with cards in hand, right? Because that can affect the draws.
Exactly. So you'll see I blocked the gun hit there with 4 cards. It's because I know Carol's use all his action points, and I don't want to pitch or play any of those cards because it's going to mess up my spacing, my deck setup.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just like, well, I might as well just get a fresh hand here.
I see.
And so
Yeah,
basically you just see
and
me block repeatedly. Like the only time I won't block is once I've got those 7 cards on the bottom,
mm-hmm.
or if I have the blocks
And
anyway.
even then, you kind of want to be able to use up all the cards in your hand, right? Because I was thinking about this strategy before, and it just seems like you can't really use cards like Tome or Findel or anything, just because it can mess up that order.
Yeah, I mean
Would you
cards like
agree with that, or?
cards like Tome you can play, and things like Cindering Foresight here as well. I'm not so much using it for damage, but at the op 3,
Mm-hmm.
if I find some of those combo pieces while I'm opting, I can just put them onto the bottom of my deck, which is great. And if they're not the
Oh, I
combo
see.
pieces, I just keep them on top. Cards like Time of Findale, you can play, but you just have to get the 7 cards on the bottom first, because once you've got those 7, um, the only time it gets complicated is when you're nearing the end of that step. So say you've got like 6 cards left in your deck, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you need to pay attention, because if you block with 4 cards and then on your next turn you draw 4, you're going to draw uh, basically 2 of the blues you need plus another couple of random cards, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
And because the reason I kind of brought it up is because you draw 4 cards a turn, and if you use something like a tome and you draw an extra card, for example, in that 4 card cycle, wouldn't that throw off, um, you know, that final draw step that where you draw the 4 blues by 1, for example?
it can a little bit, but one thing is against slow decks is like there can be turns where you can afford not to block. You do
Mm-hmm.
get, there is a bit of a risk where um, for example, I use this tome here because I haven't got the setup yet for the combo,
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't involve pitching, but that's Tome of Eighth Wind. But I mean, if you can afford to take damage and not block with 2 cards, so you're like, okay, there's um, now I'm at a point where there's 2 cards left to my 4 blues, so I'll just block with 2 cards this turn, keep 2 in hand,
Mm-hmm.
and then draw up to 2 more at the end of turn.
Oh, okay.
Also, things like Talismanic Lens and Eye of Ophidia, if you do mess up your count a little bit, you can use those to, um, to fast
Get
forward.
back on track.
Yeah, to fast
Mm-hmm.
forward the combo most of the times as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
here I
yeah, I
actually,
finally have my second chamber and I can put a bit more pressure on, but it's still the attacks with pistols just mean that I'm only threatening 2 damage, which is quite easy to block.
yeah, and I suppose one thing with this deck is, even if because this dash one doesn't play the Plasma Purifiers, but even if it did, you'd probably need to get 2 of them down,
Mm-hmm.
to start getting damage through. So here we see the command, which is quite scary, and
Mm-hmm.
luckily for me, I had the 2 cards that block for 3 in hand.
Yeah, so here I'm trying to get back the Sun Kisses just to give myself an even higher life buffer, to potentially prevent that combo at the end. So using things like sigils and sun kisses makes sure that my life total is higher than usual, giving me a higher chance to survive that end of, that 1 turn kill combo from Kano.
So one thing there, when I was going through my graveyard, I'm just counting the number of cards, because if there's 15
Mm-hmm.
cards in my graveyard, I know 15 plus 1 card in Arsenal, 16, means there's 24 cards left in my deck.
Mm-hmm. And I guess it's something to be able to do that without necessarily giving your opponent that information, um, that you're trying to count towards your final combo.
Yeah, so here you see like the downsides of the strategy is like if you can't get those cards on the bottom quickly enough, it does really, really hold you back, because you do need to get a little bit of damage over the course of the game from things like Voltic Bolts, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, decks that have a lot of life gain, like this Dash deck, they can just out life gain you to the point where you can't kill them in one shot, because it's not really
Mm.
about doing 20 damage. Often it's about doing sort of 30 or 35.
So here you see that you finally got that final piece of the combo, right, with the
Yep.
fork lightning. So you're happy to pitch more cards to. You actually have that freedom to pitch cards now to actually cast spells.
Yep, so at this point, I had the Stir on the bottom, and I would have got the Blazing Aether on the bottom as well from the opt. So yeah, you can see me pitch the Fork Lightning in order to actually get some damage through.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing as well. Against the player who's playing Totem and Findale as Wizard, you do want to, assume they don't have extra action points or anything, or even if they do, it can be a good idea to respond then. Because if you can force them to pitch cards to prevent damage, then they're gaining less life from the Tome of Findale. So in a way, you're kind of dealing pseudo damage. And here you can see I'm sort of counting through my deck, saying, okay, like at this point, how many cards am I away from the 4 blues? Now, funnily enough, you might be wondering why you haven't seen an energy potion yet. I actually realized during the game that it was an old build that I was trying around with only 1 energy potion. Whereas 2 is the standard, and it's kind of what you need for this combo. But
And in general, I guess we'd recommend any Blitz Kano player to use 2 energy potions, right?
yeah, absolutely. I think it was just a test build at some point. I'm like, oh, maybe we'll try 1, but it's just such a good card in Kano that you do want to. So here we can see, like, now that I got the combo set up, I'm just back to blocking.
Yeah, and it's interesting to watch because even playing the game, I just felt so great in terms of swinging, putting on pressure, even doing something like a Raging Onslaught is putting pressure of attacking for 5. Like I just felt like I was quite ahead in the game.
Yeah, I'm not a care in the world.
Yeah.
So now we can see, so I've got down the energy potion. And so that's
so
kind of
here
it.
you had a situation where you drew 3 cards instead of 4, right?
Yep, so now you can see I'm counting through the deck. So in my head, I'm thinking at some point I'm going to have to take damage in order to reset this count. But the good thing is, like I said, I've got that talismanic lens. So if it gets to a point where I need to sort of shift an extra couple of cards to the bottom to shortcut the combo, then I can do that.
Yeah.
So, but at this point as well, I'm realizing that, like, Carol's on 28 life. So even if I get off the full combo, so basically the full combo with 1 energy potion doesn't deal quite as much. But you can effectively play a Forked Lightning for 12, I believe, and then follow up. So you go Stir the Aether Winds with the Crucible. And so you go Stir the Aether Winds with a Crucible of Aether Weave into your Forked Lightning, which ends up dealing 12 damage. And then after that, you play 2 Blazing Aethers. So with a whole bunch of Null-Rune, it can be difficult to get all the damage through. Because while on paper that's raw sort of 12 plus 12 plus 24, 48 damage, it doesn't quite work out like that.
Yeah, and I guess it depends how many blocks your opponent has. I mean, pitch cards to prevent the arcane damage. But here we see you use Eye of Ophidia, and I guess that's kind of like a way to regain that 1 card that you've, missed in the draw step, right?
Yep, exactly. So at this point, I realized that, I'm slightly off on having to get up to the point where I know I'm going to have 4 blues in hand. So I'm like, I need to pitch Eye of Ophidia to opt away a few cards to the bottom just to reset that count. And I managed to get through a little bit of damage with the Scalding Rain, which is actually pretty handy because sort of every point of damage counts.
Yeah, definitely. It's the life difference might seem quite significant, but actually I still am in a position where I would like to be on higher life.
So yeah, so when I pitched that Eye of Ophidia there, I knew that I was 6 cards away from drawing the 4 blues that I needed for the combo. So Carol made a really good point, or even 7 cards, I think, potentially, that by doing that, I could opt 2 cards to the bottom and then banish the next card. So at this point, I've drawn the 4 blues, and I know what the top 3 cards are on my deck.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason you need to have the blues is because you need to banish all 3 of those cards.
Mm.
So
And I guess in terms of your arsenal, you've had it the whole game, right? So that is one of your kind of pieces.
yeah. So here you see I'm using the talismanic lens just to like double check. Cause I'm like I've been setting this up for 15 minutes. I'm gonna look stupid if it isn't right, but I do know what it is. So here you can see I'm banishing the stir, I'm banishing the blazing, and I'm
And you're
just
just
basically
trying to like work out if you have enough resources to pull it off.
to pull everything off. So I'm trying to work out what does Carol have in his hand, and the Volta Bolt is actually pretty critical to forcing out a couple of cards.
Mm.
So this is why you need to have the blues. So I can pay 9 resources to banish these 3 cards.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know that I've got another blue in hand for 3 resources, the energy potion, and the tunic for 6. So 6 resources, that's enough to pay for 2 for Sturdy Aether Winds, 1 for Crucible of Aetherweave, and then, sorry, I've got 7 resources total. So 6 is enough for Sturdy Aether Winds cost 2, Crucible of Aetherweave is 1, and then Fork Lightning is 3. And then I need to use the resource from the tunic for the Storm Striders, so I can play the last Blazing Aether from my arsenal. Basically, at this point, I'm thinking like I'm all in, but I'm just trying to figure out like I'm hoping, is there any way I can play around something like a sigil in Carol's arsenal if he's got a blue card plus a sigil?
Yeah, like how much damage can I actually prevent?
But I figure at this point anyway, I'm locked in, but I'm just trying to like figure out the resources. Like, can I get away with going with 1 Blazing Aether, for example? But then I'm just like, I just have to go for it. We'll do it live.
Yeah, do it live. Okay, so you play the stir, have 1 resource spare, use the energy and go for the Fork Lightning here, or I guess
Oh yeah, I think I
you
was
didn't have you had 6 resources total.
right. Yep.
2 for the stir, 3 for the forked, and then the tunic to use the boots.
Yeah. So this is why it was kind of bad that I didn't have the. It was bad that I didn't have the potion here.
Mm-hmm.
Because here I'm fortunate that the fork came through for 10, but Carol actually had a red card in hand.
Yeah, and I calculated that I would actually save more life from the double blazing aether to actually pitch the sigil instead of use it, just to prevent that kind of amplified damage over time.
Yeah, and so he had the blue card in arsenal there. So basically, the reason why you need the second energy potion, so why it's so critical, is it means you have exactly enough resources to go Crucible, use Crucible of Aetherweave and Metacarpus on that Fork Lightning, and that's effectively an extra 4 damage. Because for Fork Lightning, the way it works is it actually doubles the amount when you pump it, because it's a single source of damage, but the 2 damage gets sort of pumped up individually by buffs to arcane damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's sort of, I don't know, that's kind of an interesting game we thought, because it shows that like it looks like you can be doing nothing the entire game, but you're actually sticking to a very particular game plan. And
Yeah.
and even if there's a few sort of bumps in the road, like you kind of realize that you're supposed to have that second potion in your deck, then you can still get there. You can still just sort of power on.
And from my side, I feel like it's something like keeping a sigil in arsenal would have been better at some point in the game than playing it, just because you can throw off your opponent in terms of the count of the damage they can deal. And also, if I paid more attention to when my opponent was going to draw the 4 blues, I would have had kind of a chance to just attack with something like a pistol, holding some blues to prevent as much damage as possible.
Yeah, exactly. So if you know what the wizard player is doing, you can sometimes, try to disrupt their plans. Or like Carol said, you can try and like almost counter pitch in a way. Like if they're not going to do anything, you can just wait. And things like Sigil of Solace and Arsenal are also quite good just against wizard in general, because playing the wizard in that way, isn't particularly common. A lot of the time, you don't just have the entire game to set up. Like decks will put too much pressure on you. They might try to set
Mm-hmm.
up sort of smaller combos towards the late game. But things like Sigil of Solace are very good because usually they sort of have one chance to get you. When they use
Mm-hmm.
sort of when they go for their Storm Striders at the end of the game, it might be in a position where they're thinking, like, this is with the opponent's attack on the chain link. I'm going to use my Storm Striders to kill you before you kill me. And often,
Mm-hmm.
if you can throw off their calculations, like they calculate exactly lethal, and you can gain 3 life with a Sigil of Solace from Arsenal, that can just be enough to like mean you survive on 1 or 2 life, and then they have no cards to block with in hand and die. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very good
Yeah,
trick.
it's definitely one of those strategies that is exceptionally good against a control matchup, and where you do have that space or that breathing space to be able to pull it off. Um, yeah, especially in this matchup, I guess Dash Control doesn't have that many tools to put pressure on. But
Yeah, because outside of things like Command and Conquer, it is very difficult to actually force out blocks. Because even things like
mm-hmm,
Enlightened Strike, if I've got a combo pieces in my hand that I can't block with, it's not the end of the world for me to like take a little bit of damage there. Whereas
mm-hmm,
um, the way I play this with getting a combo piece into Arsenal early, if like particularly the Blazing Aether, which is like a little bit risky to put in there because if you put in something like a Forked Lightning or Stir the Eighth Winds into Arsenal, for example, you can actually
mm-hmm.
afford to lose one of those because you have additional copies. But if you put the Blazing Aether in, you're forced to protect it the entire game because you need 2 of them to get off that full combo.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously the second one is going to deal like way more damage than the first one.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Cool.
but yeah, I guess that's pretty much it from us today. So I suppose one final tip, one final thing I wanted to say, just going back to the Sigil as well. If you're a Wizard player, you're playing against an opponent, and if they have something in Arsenal they haven't played for a number of turns, just keep in mind that there's probably a pretty good chance it's a Sigil because they're never going to defend Arsenal defense reaction against you. And if they Arsenal a red line attack, they're probably going to look to play it at some point to put pressure on. So just one thing
Yeah.
to keep in mind.
Yeah, exactly. And do try and include it in your calculations if you think it might be that, if that's what you know they might have.
Absolutely. I will. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the game, and yeah, stay tuned to the channel because we'll look to put more up of these type of videos.
Yeah, definitely. Catch you later.